Less than 3 weeks are left until the premiere of the third Avatar, so new information and reviews are gradually starting to appear. What are the Disney executives unhappy about, and why are they predicting the sequel will gross less than the second installment? And is it true that the fourth and fifth Avatars could be cancelled if it fails? We will cover all of that in the next few minutes. First off, Disney executives have already seen the first cut of the film. This is standard practice, after which controversial elements are removed to create the theatrical version. After the screenings, many members of this exclusive club shared their notes, which ultimately resulted in the film becoming 18 minutes shorter. Scenes that don't work or add no meaning were cut, because the film was already quite long. However, something else here is interesting. Head of Disney, Bob Iger, spoke last and even criticized some of his colleagues for not seeing the big picture. He noted that the third installment turned out magnificent and that it fully explores the central idea of the franchise. Iger's opinion is a good sign because he is the one who makes the final decision on all of the studio's projects. For example, the Ben Solo standalone film depends on his position, even though it successfully passed all previous approval stages. In the case of Avatar, it's clear that no one would have rejected the film, but sending it back for re-edits or even worse, for additional shooting would have been a very real possibility. After some revisions were made, the resulting theatrical version was shown to critics. There are no full reviews yet to avoid accidentally revealing the plot. However, we have the first impressions. So, the third installment is being called simply incredibly breathtaking compared to the previous two. Someone even wrote that they managed to shed a tear a couple of times during the screening. The sequel turned out to be more emotional, deep, and dramatic. It's also noted that Varong came across as convincing and at times frightening, and the action sequences take the franchise to a new level. Avatar 3 truly feels like a midpoint, after which the plot enters the home stretch. But at the same time, not all of the plot decisions feel justified, and some critics say they are strange, to say the least. The new film doesn't stand out for its originality, and almost half of the story can be guessed along the way without much effort. Furthermore, the 3-hour runtime is being called unnecessary, and some things could have been trimmed without any loss of quality. In terms of visual effects, everything is still just as stunning, beautiful, and grand. The film simply must be seen on the big screen. It is still the same Avatar that works on the very same formula, which at times makes it seem like Cameron is repeating himself. This, by the way, raises a question about the fourth and fifth films in the franchise. The thing is, even though Flame and Ash is considered one of the biggest releases of this year, analysts are predicting the film will gross around $110 million during its opening weekend in the United States. For comparison, the previous installments were projected to make over $130 million at their launch. In other words, analysts agree that Avatar 3 will ultimately gross less than its predecessors. There is a clear fatigue with Cameron's formula. The first film grossed almost $3 billion at the box office, which, adjusted for today's inflation, would turn into a full $4 billion. The second installment also crossed the $2 billion mark, but the result was slightly more modest, just over $2 billion. The third film will likely not surpass this bar, although it will still probably make $1.5 billion for sure. Therefore, Avatar 4 and Avatar 5 are not under any global threat, but the decline in audience interest will be felt, which means production costs will get smaller and smaller. Cameron, by the way, shared in an interview with the Town Portal that he gets nervous before the premiere of every one of his films. The fact is, the director is well aware that audiences often ignore sequels if the first installments feel narratively complete. This, of course, refers to the widest possible audience, not just the fans who are happy with any expansion of the franchise. This explains the emerging decline in the box office for the second and likely the third films. The only exception is perhaps The Lord of the Rings, where the third part was the culmination of the story. There, the breaks between premieres were only 1 year, so the public hadn't had time to completely forget the events of the first films and happily went to the cinema. Avatar has already stretched over a decade and a half, and the announced 6th and 7th installments might be released sometime in the 40s. Therefore, Cameron stated that if Flame and Ash doesn't collect the necessary amount for the studio at the box office, it could very well become the end of the story. In other words, the director confirmed that the third part does, in fact, have a logical ending, and it doesn't necessarily need another 2 or 4 parts to complete the tale. On one hand, this is somewhat frightening because you wouldn't want to be left hanging and feel that a final point hasn't been made somewhere. But on the other hand, it means the film will feel more complete and most of the storylines will be brought to their proper conclusion. And the director himself has said that the upcoming installment will leave only one storyline open, while most others will be closed. By the way, the director also added that if Flame and Ash is the last Avatar in theaters, he will release a book that will tell the future fate of the heroes. But let's be honest, while filming the third movie, Cameron was already shooting scenes for the fourth and fifth parts, and the Oscar-winning newcomers were announced a couple of years ago and are set to appear in the future. Therefore, few doubt that the sequels might not be released, especially since for the director, Avatar is not only about art, but also about exploring new technologies. On this matter, by the way, Cameron gave a rather interesting comment. In one of his recent interviews, he noted that he considers the existing motion capture technology a true art form and an exceptional form of acting. For many years, there was a belief that such techniques involving graphics did not allow actors to fully express themselves, and that it was all nothing more than entertainment. However, the first Avatar changed these perceptions among the masses and proved that modern computer graphics can be of high quality. Cameron spoke about this in the context of artificial intelligence and its applications in cinema. In Hollywood, opinions still differ on how appropriate it is to use artificial intelligence in filmmaking. Guillermo del Toro is a sharp critic of such innovations, which is why he relied solely on practical effects for his Frankenstein. I mean, his team built an actual ship instead of using computer graphics. On the other hand, there are people in the film industry who are not against the introduction of artificial intelligence, and Amazon itself recently made headlines by using artificial intelligence to dub an anime. The result was not great, to put it mildly, but in theory, this could really speed up a studio's workflow and give audiences more variety in voice tracks. Cameron, being at the forefront of computer graphics on this issue, prefers not to take sides or make sharp statements. However, he broke his neutrality by saying that the prospect of fully artificial actors and the replacement of real ones scares him. At this rate, the industry could lose its connection with the audience, and cinema could become entirely a product of artificial intelligence. That is why he prefers to work with actors directly and then apply the graphics later. Thus, in the future avatars that he himself will direct, a wide implementation of artificial intelligence is not expected. Now, regarding the plot details. Considering that Cameron hinted that the upcoming threequel will leave only one narrative thread and resolve the current lines related to the Sully family, we can say for sure what he meant. It is unlikely that the single thread the director spoke of will be related to new characters. The audience won't have time to get used to them, which means this particular line will be based on what already exists in the franchise. Therefore, it's most likely about Spider and Quaritch. The Way of Water was really just the beginning of their relationship when Spider rejected his biological father, but didn't let him die. Now, it's Quaritch's turn to finally show some fatherly feelings. We know that in the third part, he will be working with the Fire Clan, which means he will continue to bother the Na'vi, just like in the previous films. But narratively, everything is leading to the fact that Stephen Lang's character must find a moment of redemption, which will give Spider a reason to believe that his father is not so bad after all. At least that would be in Cameron's style. Thus, Avatar 4 will tell the story of how this pair tries to build a new relationship, overcoming their conflict. Lang has spoken about filming scenes for the fifth part of Avatar, which means Quaritch is unlikely to die anytime soon. Therefore, it is too early to conclude Spider's storyline, and consequently, it would be logical to leave this theme open after the third film. Cameron makes no secret that Quaritch will change significantly in the upcoming film. A path of overcoming and self-definition awaits him, because now he is no longer human, but more Na'vi. The director also mentioned his growing connection with Awa. I wouldn't be surprised if the Colonel ends up switching to Pandora's side and becoming an anti-hero. So, to sum up, you shouldn't expect anything overly surprising from the third Avatar. It is an outstanding cinematic spectacle that works perfectly to immerse you in the magical world of Pandora and the culture of its native peoples. At the center of the plot are the same heroes, the same conflict, which will take a new turn. If it's a success, we'll be going to see the next installments for another 20 years. If it's a failure, we won't, but few people believe that. So we are waiting for December 19th to finally see everything with our own eyes, and we will definitely break it all down in detail. In the meantime, write in the comments whether you believe that the Avatars will ever end and if the third film could really fail to be a success. That's all for today, friends. See you in new videos very soon.